My name's Benji and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we're teaching you how to play Flashpoint Fire Rescue. So we've already done a review for this game and I'll put a link to that in the description below. So we're teaching you in the most concise manner possible without giving you information overload. So let's get our hoses on. So the object of the game is for you as firefighters to get into the building, keep on top of all the fire and smoke that's advancing and rescue 7 visitors by getting to these points of interest, flipping them to find the victims, then hauling them out of the building. But you're going to lose the game if at any point you lose 4 victims to the fire or the building entirely collapses. So we're teaching you here the starter game, which has predetermined starting points for all the fire tokens. So you'll just need to go to the relevant page on the rulebook to set up the board state. And at the end of this video, I'll explain a little bit about some of those advanced concepts that you'll then incorporate into the game after those first few games. So you'll need easy access to all of the tokens that come with the game, and these points of interest are going to be what's placed face down here and placed on the board throughout and will represent either victims or false alarms. And then you've got 2 dice here, and these are black squares that will represent, or cubes that will represent, the building collapsing or damage done to its walls. So once you've then taken one of your firefighter models and placed it on a space at the edge of the building, and recommended that you place them next to open doors, you're then good to go. So each turn is wholly conducted by one player, and then once they finish their turn they pass to the player to their left. So in this starter game, each player's firefighter will get 4 action points, and you can spend action points in a number of different ways, and we'll go through those now. So you can use 1 action point to move to an adjacent square, and adjacent is left, right, up or down to them. So long as they're not walking through walls, they can only walk through open doors or open spaces. It costs 2 action points to move into or through a space with fire in it. So fire is quite clearly represented here on the token, and on the flip side to all fire tokens is smoke. You can move with a victim for 2 action points. So the idea being that you're hunting down these points of interest and then flipping them over to see whether they're a victim or a false alarm. So false alarms will just be a blank token, and you'll replenish those at the end of the turn. So once you've got a victim hoisted over your shoulder, which costs nothing, anytime you move with that firefighter, it will cost you 2 action points instead. You can open and close a door for 1 action point. So you'll see here the internal doors all start the game closed, so 1 action point will allow you to open those. You can extinguish smoke for 1 action point, and as you'd expect then it will cost you 2 action points to extinguish it to smoke and then extinguish the fire entirely. You can just flip it to smoke for 1 action point if you so desire. And the last action you can do in this starter game is to chop, and that costs 2 action points, and you would only chop a wall. So to completely destroy a wall and allow you to gain access through that space, you'll need to chop at it twice and place these black cubes in here that represent damaged walls, and whenever there are 2 there, that wall's destroyed and will effectively act like a door for all other purposes. So once you've finished using all of your actions up, and you don't actually have to use all of them on your turn, you can save some for the next turn if you want, so long as you never have more than 4 at the end of your turn. So then we move to the advanced fire phase, and this is where you roll for smoke. So you're going to roll the 2 dice here, 1d6 and 1d8, and that's going to reference where on the board in terms of grid reference that smoke will advance the fire. So here you'll see the numbers that are vertically referenced on the d6 dice, and the numbers horizontally are represented by the numbers you roll on the d8 black dice. So here we need to go down to row 5 and across then to column 7. And what happens when you advance fire will really depend on what grid reference and what tokens are already in that space. So we'll go through that now, starting with the dice that we rolled, anytime the fire advances on a space that already has fire, then there's going to be an explosion. So an explosion will take place in all adjacent spaces. And what will happen when an explosion takes place will again similarly depend on what is in the space adjacent. So anytime there is a wall directly adjacent, you'll place one damage marker on there. Remember, it requires 2 of those cubes to destroy that wall entirely. So that's what's going to happen here and here. But going downwards, where there's no space or nothing in the space, you'll immediately place a fire token and the explosion will stop at that point then. Here, where there's a fire token adjacent to it, that's going to cause a cascading effect and will continue the explosion until which point it meets a wall that's not been destroyed or a space that's empty or has smoke in it. So we'll then move one further space here to do 1 damage to this wall. You'll then resolve knockdowns. So if at any point the fire spreads to a point of interest or a victim or to your firefighter, you'll either lose that victim and place it in the casualty section of the board here, and if it's one of your firefighters, you'll then place it outside the building on one of these blue spaces that you'll find in the experience game will house both the ambulance and the fire engine in these orange spaces. That then completes the advanced fire phase, and then you move to the replenish point of interest phase. So if at any point there are less than 3 points of interest on the board, that player will immediately roll the 2 dice and place one in a space on the board accordingly. However, if it's in a space with fire, you'll place the point of interest down and then remove that token. But that's not the way the game's played in the experience version, but here in the starter game, that helps ease you into the game and make sure there isn't any conflicts that you have to refer back to the rules for. So remember, the idea is that you're trying to get victims to an outside space in the building, because as soon as you do, you then place that victim in the rescued pile here. And remember, the idea is you want 7 rescued victims before you get 4 victims lost, or before all of these damage cubes are placed on the board, denoting the building then collapsing. So once you get to the experience game, you're going to be each picking specialists as firefighters. So some continue to have 4 action points, but others, like the generalist, will have 5 action points, and others will give you certain benefits, like it costing, for example here, 1 AP instead of 2 to chop at a wall, and the fire captain will give you 2 free command action points, which will allow you to move the other players' firefighters as well. The game will also incorporate hotspots that will further advance the fire on a turn that the fire is advanced into those spaces, and also hazmats. And any time the fire is advanced onto a space with a hazmat, there will be an immediate explosion. You'll also add to the game these fire trucks and these ambulances, and you're going to need to drag the victims to the ambulance wherever it is around the board, because there's only 1 of each, but you can use action points to radio and move the ambulance and the fire engine. So the fire engine will help you extinguish a larger portion of the fire in the quadrant that you've parked the fire engine up in, but will cost 4 action points to do so. So that's how this game plays. Now it's up to you to don your hero's cape and get this to the table.